I never believed in those moments that divide your life into before and after. You know, the kind of thing people talk about in movies or those overly dramatic Reddit posts: before the accident, after the diagnosis, before I met them, after everything changed. But I was wrong. My before and after moment came on a Tuesday night in late September, and it started with something as ordinary as my roommate falling asleep on our couch. Let me back up. My name is Adrian, and at 26 I thought I had my life reasonably figured out. I worked as a graphic designer for a mid-sized marketing firm in Portland, lived in a decent two-bedroom apartment in the Pearl District, and had successfully convinced myself that I was content with my carefully constructed routine. Wake up, go to the gym, work, come home, watch Netflix, sleep, repeat. Safe, predictable, emotionally uncomplicated. I'd been out as gay since college, but dating had always felt like trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. A few relationships here and there, nothing that stuck. After my last breakup 2 years ago, a guy named Trevor who decided he needed to find himself in Thailand, I'd more or less accepted that maybe I was just better suited for the single life. I had my work, my small circle of friends, my Sunday morning coffee ritual. It was enough. Or at least that's what I kept telling myself. Enter Marcus Chen. Marcus became my roommate in June after my previous roommate, Katie, moved in with her boyfriend. I'd posted an ad on Craigslist, interviewed a handful of people who ranged from mildly concerning to outright terrifying, and was about to give up when Marcus responded. We met at a coffee shop near my apartment. He was 24, worked as a software engineer for a startup, and had just relocated to Portland from San Francisco. He was effortlessly put together in that way. Some people just are: dark hair styled just messy enough to look intentional, warm brown eyes behind black-framed glasses, and a smile that felt genuine rather than the forced politeness you get from someone trying to make a good impression. Fair warning, he'd said during that first meeting, stirring his iced Americano, I'm kind of a neat freak, not like psycho level, but I do have a thing about dishes in the sink. I'm good with that, I'd replied. I'm pretty low-key, work a lot, not much of a party person. Same, I mean, I like going out sometimes, but mostly I'm home playing video games or coding. We'd chatted for another 30 minutes about rent splits, utilities, house rules. It felt easy, uncomplicated. We signed the lease agreement 2 days later. Those first few months of living together were surprisingly smooth. Marcus was, as promised, neat but not annoyingly so. He worked long hours at his startup, often coming home after I'd already had dinner. We'd exchange pleasantries, maybe watch an episode of whatever show we were both into at the time, then retreat to our respective rooms, friendly but with clear boundaries. I noticed things about him, of course: the way he'd run his hand through his hair when he was frustrated with his code, how he always made extra coffee in the morning and would leave some in the pot for me, the fact that he hummed while he cooked, usually something off-key that I could never quite identify, the small stack of fantasy novels on his nightstand that I'd spotted when I'd helped him move his desk. But I kept those observations filed away in the mental category of neutral roommate facts, nothing more. I definitely didn't let myself think about how his t-shirts fit across his shoulders, or the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed at something genuinely funny, or how my heart did this stupid little skip the few times our hands accidentally brushed when we both reached for the same thing. Because that would be complicated. And I'd promised myself, no complications. September 24th started like any other Tuesday. I worked from home that day, grinding through a presentation deck for a client who couldn't decide whether they wanted bold and edgy or sophisticated and timeless, two aesthetics that, despite what they believed, do not actually mesh well together. By 6 p.m., my eyes were burning from staring at my screen, and I was ready to call it a day. Marcus had texted around 4 to say he'd be home for dinner, which was unusual. His startup was in crunch mode for some big product launch, and he'd been practically living at the office for the past 2 weeks. Pizza, he'd suggested. My treat, consider it an apology for being a ghost lately. You don't have to apologize for working, but I'll never say no to pizza. He came home around 7 with 2 large boxes from our favorite place down the street, one margarita, one loaded with every vegetable imaginable, because Marcus was one of those people who actually enjoyed healthy food even on pizza. You look exhausted, I said when he walked in, because he did. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his usual careful styling had given way to hair that stuck up in several directions. 70-hour work week will do that to you, he said, setting the pizzas on our small dining table. But we finally got the beta version stable, so I actually get to sleep tonight like a normal human. We ate at the table rather than in front of the TV, which was also unusual for us. Marcus told me about his project, something to do with machine learning and predictive analytics that went mostly over my head, but I liked watching him talk about it. His whole face lit up when he discussed the technical challenges they'd overcome. Sorry, he said, catching himself mid-explanation of some algorithm. I'm totally boring you. You're not, I said, and I meant it. I like hearing about it even if I don't understand half of what you're saying. He smiled at that, a softer expression than his usual grin. What about you? How's the indecisive client? I launched into my own work frustrations and he listened with the same attention I'd given him, asking questions, laughing at my snarky commentary about corporate branding decisions. It felt nice more than nice. It felt like the kind of easy intimacy I'd been telling myself I didn't need. After dinner, Marcus helped clean up. Well, he did most of the cleaning while I half-heartedly dried the plates he washed. We migrated to the living room and he collapsed onto our worn second-hand couch with a groan that was almost comical. I'm putting on something mindless, he declared, grabbing the remote. My brain can't handle anything with a plot right now. We settled on some baking competition show, the kind where perky contestants make elaborate cakes while friendly British judges offer encouraging feedback. It was exactly the kind of mindless content we both needed. Marcus stretched out on the couch, his long legs taking up most of the space. I took my usual spot in the armchair, laptop balanced on my knees as I half-watched the show and half-scrolled through my work email. You don't have to sit over there, Marcus said after a while, there's room. He wasn't wrong, it was a pretty big couch, but something about the offer made my pulse quicken in a way I didn't want to examine too closely. I'm good here, I said, keeping my tone light. He shrugged, already getting drowsy. Suit yourself. We watched 3 episodes during which Marcus's responses to the on-screen drama became increasingly delayed and mumbly. Somewhere during episode 4, I looked over to find his eyes closed, his breathing deep and even. He'd fallen asleep. I should have woken him up, told him to go to bed. That would have been the normal, sensible thing to do. Instead, I just watched him. In sleep, all the little tensions he carried disappeared. His face looked younger, peaceful. His glasses had slipped down his nose slightly, and without thinking, I found myself getting up, crossing the room, gently removing them and setting them on the coffee table. He stirred slightly at my touch but didn't wake, just shifted deeper into the couch cushions. I should have gone to bed. I should have left him there and retreated to my room and maintained the careful distance I'd been preserving for months. Instead, I sat down on the opposite end of the couch, telling myself I'd just finished the episode. That's when everything changed. I'm not sure exactly when I fell asleep. One moment I was watching someone construct an elaborate sugar sculpture and the next I was blinking awake to the Netflix "Are you still watching?" screen casting the room in a dim blue glow. The TV had gone into standby mode and the apartment was silent except for the ambient hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing on the street below. And Marcus was pressed against me. At some point while we'd both been sleeping, we'd migrated toward each other. He'd shifted from his end of the couch. And I'd apparently done the same until we'd met somewhere in the middle. His head was on my shoulder, one of his arms draped across my chest, our legs tangled together. I froze. My first instinct was panic. I should move. I should wake him up. This was crossing about 17 different roommate boundaries, and if he woke up and found us like this, it would be mortifying for both of us. But then he made this small sound in his sleep, almost a sigh, and pressed closer, and every rational thought in my head evaporated. He was warm, he smelled like the sandalwood soap he used, and something else, something that was just inherently Marcus. His hair was soft where it brushed against my neck. I could feel his heartbeat against my side, steady and strong. And I realized, with a clarity that was almost painful, that I had been lying to myself for months. I wasn't content, I wasn't fine with my uncomplicated routine. I wasn't over wanting connection, wanting intimacy, wanting love. I wanted this, I wanted him. The realization hit me like a physical thing, stealing my breath. Because this wasn't just attraction, though there was definitely that. This was bigger, deeper. This was all those little moments I'd been filing away as neutral roommate facts suddenly rearranging themselves into a pattern I could no longer ignore. The way my day felt brighter when I knew he'd be home for dinner. How I'd started buying the specific brand of cereal he liked even though it was more expensive. The fact that I'd catch myself listening for his key in the door, that I slept better knowing he was just down the hall, that the apartment felt emptier on the nights he stayed late at work. I was in love with my roommate. I was in love with Marcus. And I was absolutely, completely screwed. Because he was straight, or at least I'd assumed he was straight. We'd never explicitly talked about it, but he'd mentioned an ex-girlfriend once, and he'd never given any indication that he was interested in guys. He'd never asked about my dating life, never commented when I'd mentioned being gay in passing conversation. This thing I was feeling, this overwhelming warmth spreading through my chest as he slept against me, it was one-sided. It had to be. The smart thing would be to extract myself carefully, go to my room, and pretend this never happened. In the morning, we'd both wake up in our respective beds, and I could go back to pretending I didn't feel like my heart was trying to escape my chest every time he smiled at me. But I didn't move. I told myself it was because I didn't want to wake him, that he needed the sleep after his brutal work week. But the truth was simpler and more selfish. I didn't want this moment to end. I wanted to memorize exactly how this felt, to have something to hold on to later when I was alone in my room and reality had reasserted itself. So I stayed there, barely breathing, feeling like I was holding something infinitely precious and infinitely fragile. That's when Marcus spoke. Adrian, his voice was rough with sleep, barely above a whisper. My whole body tensed. Hey, sorry we both fell asleep, I should. I started to pull away, but his arm tightened around me. Don't. I froze again, but for a completely different reason. Don't. Don't move, not yet. He was still pressed against me, his face hidden against my shoulder. Can we stay like this, just for a minute? My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could feel it. Marcus. I know this is weird, he continued, words tumbling out in a rush. And if you want me to go, I'll go right now and we can pretend this never happened, but, he took a shaky breath. But I've been trying so hard not to do this, not to feel this, and I'm so tired, Adrian, I'm so tired of pretending. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Pretending what? He finally lifted his head, and even in the dim light from the window, I could see the vulnerability in his eyes, the fear mixed with something that looked almost like hope. That I don't feel this way about you, he said quietly. That I didn't move to Portland partially because my ex-girlfriend figured out I was bi before I did and it imploded everything. That I didn't take this room because I thought you were cute and then fall completely for you over the past 4 months. That I don't come up with excuses to work from home on days when I know you'll be here. That the best part of my day isn't when I hear your key in the door. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at him as he continued. And I know this could ruin everything. I know I should have kept my mouth shut, should have just gotten up and gone to my room and never said anything. But I woke up here with you and it felt so right that his voice cracked slightly. I couldn't pretend anymore, even if you don't feel the same way, even if this makes everything awkward, I just needed you to know. For a long moment, I couldn't find my voice. Marcus was pulling away now, the vulnerability in his eyes shifting toward embarrassment, toward regret. I'm sorry, he said, starting to stand. Fuck, I shouldn't have. I caught his wrist, stopping him. I bought you that cereal, I said, which wasn't at all what I'd meant to say. The expensive organic one, the one you mentioned once that you liked. I buy it every week now even though it's like $8 a box. He stared at me confused. What? And I started going to bed earlier because I know you get home around 10 and I wanted to be awake when you got in. And last month when you had that presentation to the investors, I was so nervous for you that I couldn't focus on my own work. The words were spilling out now, unstoppable. I learned the lyrics to that song you're always humming so I could figure out what it was. It's Holocene by Bon Iver, by the way, and I had to stop, had to swallow around the lump in my throat. I have been completely, hopelessly in love with you for months, Marcus. And I was so sure you were straight that this was just one more situation where I was falling for someone I couldn't have, so I didn't say anything. I thought if I could just keep it together, if I could just be your friend and your roommate and nothing more, that maybe eventually these feelings would fade. Did they, he asked softly, fade? No, I laughed, a broken sound. They just got stronger every single day. Marcus sank back onto the couch, but this time there was no hesitation, no careful distance. He moved close, reaching up to cup my face with both hands. "I'm not straight," he said, and there was a tremor in his voice. "I'm bisexual. I've known since college but didn't really accept it until my ex basically forced me to. She found messages on my phone, nothing physical, just me talking to a friend about being confused about my sexuality. She was actually amazing about it, helped me work through it, but we both realized our relationship wasn't going to work once everything was out in the open." "You never mentioned." "I was terrified," he admitted. "I know Portland is progressive, I know you're gay and would obviously be accepting, but there's this thing with coming out as bi where people assume you're either secretly gay or just going through a phase, and I didn't want you to think." He stopped, laughed shakily. "God, listen to me. I was worried about what you'd think of my sexuality while being completely head over heels for you. The irony isn't lost on me." I covered his hands with mine, turning to press a kiss to his palm. The gesture felt natural, inevitable, like something I'd been holding back from doing for months. "For the record," I said, "I would never think that, and I'm sorry you felt like you couldn't tell me. I wanted to, so many times, but I kept talking myself out of it, convinced that these feelings were one-sided, that I was just your roommate and nothing more." "We're both idiots," I said. "Complete idiots," he agreed, and then he smiled, that beautiful smile I'd been cataloging in my memory for months, except now it was just for me. "But maybe we can be idiots together." Instead of answering with words, I closed the distance between us and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, both of us still half afraid this wasn't real. But then Marcus made this small sound in the back of his throat and deepened the kiss, and suddenly tentative became urgent, months of repressed feelings pouring out all at once. His hands were in my hair, mine were gripping his waist, and we were pressed together so tightly I couldn't tell where I ended and he began. He tasted like the mint toothpaste he used and something sweet I couldn't identify, and kissing him felt like finally coming home after being lost for years. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "I've wanted to do that since approximately June 23rd. He said. "The day we met. The day you helped me move in and I watched you carry that heavy box of books up 3 flights of stairs without complaining, and then you made that joke about how you hoped I actually liked reading and wasn't just using books as some kind of weird decorative element." He laughed. "You were so effortlessly funny and kind, and when you smiled at me I just knew." "Knew what?" "That I was in trouble, the best kind of trouble." I kissed him again, slower this time, savoring it. "We should probably talk about this," I said between kisses. "About what this means about us." "We should," he agreed, though he made no move to stop kissing me. "We should be practical and set boundaries and figure out how to navigate being roommates who are also, whatever we are, boyfriends," I suggested, my heart hammering at the word. Is that too fast? We can take this slow if you want, we don't have to." He silenced me with another kiss. "Adrian, I've been in love with you for months. I don't want to take it slow. I want to be your boyfriend. I want to wake up like this every morning. I want to stop pretending that you're just my roommate when you're so much more than that." Something in my chest cracked open, something I hadn't even realized I'd been keeping locked away. "Yes," I said, "yes to all of that." We stayed up talking until almost 4 in the morning, curled up together on that couch, sharing all the things we'd been holding back for months. Marcus told me about growing up in San Francisco, about being the youngest of 3 siblings and always feeling like he had to prove himself. About his journey to accepting his bisexuality, about the fear and confusion and eventual relief when he finally stopped trying to fit into a box that didn't match his shape. I told him about my own coming out story, about how my parents had been supportive in that well-meaning but slightly clueless way where they tried too hard and asked too many questions. About Trevor and the way that relationship had ended, about how I'd convinced myself I was better off alone rather than risk that kind of hurt again. "I'm not him," Marcus said when I finished that story, his hand finding mine in the darkness. "I'm not going to leave. I'm not going to decide one day that I need to find myself somewhere else. I'm already exactly where I want to be." "Promise?" I asked, feeling vulnerable and young. "Promise," he said and kissed my knuckles. We talked about practical things too. How we'd navigate our living situation. Did we tell our friends right away? Our families? Did we want to eventually get a 1-bedroom place together or keep our separate spaces? "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Marcus said, laughing. "We've been officially together for approximately 3 hours. Maybe we should see how the first week goes before we start planning our domestic future. Fair point, I conceded. Though for the record, I vote for eventually getting a one-bedroom. This apartment has terrible water pressure, and if we're going to shower together. I stopped, suddenly shy. Sorry, is that too presumptive? He grinned, that mischievous edge I rarely saw from him. I'm absolutely counting on showering together, among other things. Heat flooded my face and he laughed, pulling me closer. You're adorable when you blush, he said. I'm not adorable, I'm 26 and a fully grown adult. You're adorable, he insisted, deal with it. Eventually, exhaustion won out over the desire to keep talking. Marcus yawned and I realized I was barely keeping my own eyes open. We should sleep, I said reluctantly. Yeah, but neither of us moved. Your bed or mine, he asked after a moment. The question sent a thrill through me, mine's bigger. Yours then. We made our way down the hall, hands linked, both of us suddenly a bit shy now that we were transitioning from couch cuddling to actual bed sharing. I'd been in Marcus's room plenty of times before and he'd been in mine, but this felt different, weighted with possibility. Marcus borrowed a t-shirt from me unnecessarily since his room was literally right next door, but I loved the sight of him in my clothes too much to point this out. We climbed into my bed, and after a moment of awkward navigation, settled into a position that felt natural, his back against my chest, my arm around his waist, his fingers laced through mine. This okay, I murmured against his shoulder. Perfect, he said, this is perfect. I kissed the back of his neck just once and felt him shiver. Good night, Marcus. Good night, Adrian's. I fell asleep feeling more content than I had in years, maybe ever. And when I woke up 6 hours later, he was still there, still pressed against me, still real. The morning light filtered through my curtains, casting everything in soft gold. Marcus was awake too, I realized, though he hadn't moved. Hey, I said, voice rough with sleep. He turned in my arms so we were facing each other. His hair was a complete disaster, sticking up at impossible angles, and his eyes were still heavy with sleep. He looked beautiful. Hey yourself, he said, smiling, so this wasn't a dream. If it was, we're both having the same one. Good, he leaned in and kissed me, slow and sweet and full of promise. I could get used to waking up like this. Yeah, I agreed, pulling him closer, me too. The first week of being with Marcus, actually being with him, was like learning to breathe underwater. Everything was familiar and completely new at the same time. We agreed to take things slow in terms of telling people, not because we were hiding, but because we wanted time to figure out what we were to each other without external input. The apartment became our bubble, a space where we could be ourselves without explanation or performance. The shift in our dynamic was subtle in some ways, seismic in others. Marcus still worked long hours, but he came home for lunch more often, and we'd eat together while he told me about his morning. I'd find excuses to work from the living room when I knew he'd be on a video call from his room, just to catch glimpses of him through his doorway, to feel less alone while working. The casual touches that had been rare before became constant. His hand on my lower back as he moved past me in the kitchen, my fingers in his hair while we watched TV. The way he'd kiss my temple when he got up to get water, casual and affectionate like he'd been doing it for years. We were learning each other in new ways. I discovered that Marcus was not a morning person despite his job requiring early starts, and that he needed at least one full cup of coffee before he could form coherent sentences. He learned that I had a habit of stress cleaning when work was overwhelming, and started timing his gaming sessions for when I was scrubbing the kitchen counters at 9 p.m. You know, you can just tell me when you're stressed, he said one evening, watching me reorganize the spice cabinet. You don't have to clean the entire apartment. But then how would we maintain our feng shui? I countered. He rolled his eyes but pulled me away from the cabinet and into his lap on the couch. Talk to me, what's going on? So I did. I told him about the client who kept changing their mind, about the deadline I was worried about missing, about feeling like I wasn't good enough at my job. And he listened, really listened, and then helped me break down the project into manageable pieces. That became our pattern. He'd help me de-stress through organization and problem solving. I'd help him decompress from his intense work days through mindless TV and bad jokes. We still maintained our separate rooms technically, but most nights we ended up in the same bed. Usually mine since it was bigger, though sometimes we'd fall asleep in his room after he'd shown me whatever he was coding. I loved watching him work. The way his brow furrowed in concentration, the unconscious way he'd chew his bottom lip when he was stuck on a problem, the triumphant little gesture he'd make when he figured something out. "You're starring again," he'd say without looking away from his screen. "Can't help it, you're pretty when you're thinking." He'd actually blush and try to hide his smile. "You're distracting me." That's the idea. The physical aspect of our relationship progressed naturally, neither of us rushing but both clearly wanting more. Kissing on the couch turned into making out, which turned into wandering hands and breathless pauses. "Is this okay?" became our constant refrain, both of us checking in, making sure we were on the same page. It was more than okay, it was everything. Our first time together happened 2 weeks after that initial night on the couch. It wasn't planned or particularly romantic. We'd been kissing on my bed and things had escalated, and suddenly we were both naked and nervous and wanting. "We don't have to," I started, but Marcus silenced me with a kiss. "I want to," he said. "Do you?" "Yeah," I breathed. "Yeah, I really do." It was fumbling and awkward in the way first times often are, both of us learning what the other liked, what made the other gasp or moan or laugh. But it was also intimate in a way I'd never experienced before, this sense of being completely vulnerable with someone and having them handle that vulnerability with care. Afterwards, we lay tangled together, sweaty and sated and grinning like idiots. "That was," Marcus started, then seemed to lose the words. "Yeah," I agreed, understanding perfectly. He turned to look at me, and there was something in his expression that made my breath catch. "I love you," he said quietly. "I know it's fast and maybe I'm supposed to wait longer before saying it, but I do, I love you." My eyes burned with sudden tears. "I love you too, so much." He kissed me, soft and slow, and I thought maybe this was what people meant when they talked about finding home in another person. We told our friends 3 weeks in. Marcus's startup colleague Jessica was the first to know, mainly because she'd stopped by the apartment unannounced one Saturday morning and found us making breakfast together, Marcus in my t-shirt, me in his sweatpants, both of us clearly having just woken up. "Oh," she'd said, standing in our doorway. "Oh." Marcus had gone bright red. "Jess, this is we were." "Dadding," she supplied helpfully. "I have eyes, Marcus." "How did you know?" he asked. She'd given him a look. "You've been smiling at your phone for 3 weeks, you actually left work on time yesterday, and you have a hickey on your neck that your hoodie is not hiding as well as you think it is." Marcus's hand flew to his neck, and I couldn't help laughing. "I like her," I told him. "Shut up," he muttered, but he was smiling. Jessica had been thrilled, of course, and immediately started asking questions about how we got together, how long we'd been into each other, why Marcus hadn't told her he was living with the hottest guy I've ever seen. "No offense, Marcus." "Some offense taken," Marcus said, but he was grinning. Telling my best friend Liam went similarly well, though he was significantly less surprised. "Finally," he'd said when I told him over drinks, "I was wondering how long you two were going to dance around each other." "What do you mean finally?" "Adrian, buddy, you've mentioned Marcus approximately 800 times in the past 4 months. You literally reorganized your work schedule so you'd be home when he was. You bought him that stupidly expensive cereal." "How do you know about the cereal?" "You told me, you were like, 'Oh, Marcus likes this cereal, so I bought some.' Like that's a normal thing to do for a random roommate." I'd buried my face in my hands. Was I that obvious? "Painfully, but I'm happy for you, man, you deserve this." Marcus's family took a bit more navigation. His parents were supportive of his sexuality in theory, but he'd never actually brought a boyfriend home before. When he called to tell them about us, I sat next to him on the couch, holding his hand while he talked. "Mom, I'm dating someone," he said. "His name is Adrian and he's really important to me." I could hear his mother's delighted response, even without the phone being on speaker. "Can we meet him?" she asked. "Can you bring him for Thanksgiving?" Marcus looked at me, question in his eyes. I nodded. "Yeah," he told her. "Yeah, we'll be there." My own parents were equally enthusiastic when I told them, though my mother immediately started asking questions about Marcus's job, his family, his intentions, all the protective parent things. Mom, we've been together for less than a month. You don't need to interrogate him yet. I just want to make sure he's good enough for my son. He is, I said with absolute certainty. He really is. As fall turned to winter, Marcus and I settled into a rhythm that felt like it had always existed. We started a tradition of Sunday morning farmers market trips, wandering through the stalls hand in hand, buying fresh vegetables and artisan bread and whatever else caught our eye. Marcus discovered I couldn't cook to save my life and took it upon himself to teach me basic techniques. "How have you survived this long?" he asked one evening, watching me struggle to dice an onion. "Takeout and frozen dinners mostly." He'd taken the knife from me, demonstrated the proper technique, then handed it back and stood behind me, his hands guiding mine. It was very distracting, but I did eventually learn to properly dice an onion. In return, I introduced him to my world of design and visual art. We spent hours in art galleries, me explaining composition and color theory while he asked questions that made me see familiar pieces in new ways. "You make everything more interesting," he said once as we stood in front of a particularly complex abstract painting. "The way you see the world, it's beautiful." We had our first real fight in November. It was stupid, the kind of argument that happens when two people are tired and stressed and taking it out on each other rather than the actual sources of their frustration. Marcus had been working 18-hour days for 2 weeks straight for his product launch, and I was underwater with 3 major client deadlines. We'd barely seen each other, and when we did, we were both exhausted and short-tempered. The fight started over dishes. He'd snapped at me for leaving a coffee mug in the sink. I'd snapped back about his work papers covering the entire dining table and escalated from there. Old insecurities surfaced. He accused me of not understanding how demanding his job was. I accused him of prioritizing work over our relationship. "Maybe this was a mistake," I'd said in the heat of the moment. "Maybe we should have stayed just roommates." The look on his face, hurt and shock and something that looked like fear, made me regret the words immediately. "You don't mean that," he said quietly. I stopped, took a breath, forced myself to be honest. "No, I don't mean that, I'm sorry, I'm just frustrated and tired and I'm taking it out on you." "I'm sorry too," he said. "You're right that I've been prioritizing work. There's so much pressure to perform, to prove myself, and I've been letting it consume me." We talked it out, really talked about expectations and needs and how to better communicate when we were stressed. We promised to check in with each other more, to not let resentment build up. "I love you," Marcus said when we'd worked through it, "even when you're being stubborn and leaving mugs in the sink." "I love you too," I replied, "even when you're being a workaholic who covers our table in paperwork." "Do you want to know something?" he asked, pulling me close. "What?" "That was our first fight and we worked through it. We talked and listened and didn't run away." He kissed my forehead. "That feels significant." He was right. It did feel significant, because the easy part of a relationship is the honeymoon phase, the butterflies and passion. The hard part is choosing each other even when things aren't easy, even when you're tired and frustrated and not at your best. And we'd chosen each other. Thanksgiving with Marcus's family was both terrifying and wonderful. His parents were warm and welcoming, his older siblings mercilessly teasing but clearly protective of him. His nephew, a precocious 8-year-old named Jamie, had declared me cool after I'd helped him build an elaborate Lego set, which apparently gave me permanent approval in the Chen family. "They love you," Marcus whispered to me that night as we lay in his childhood bedroom, surrounded by old posters and high school trophies. "Your mom asked me about my intentions," I whispered back. "What did you tell her?" "That I intend to love you for as long as you'll let me." In the darkness I felt him smile. "What if I want forever?" "Then forever it is," I said. December brought Christmas lights and cold rain and the quiet joy of our first holidays together. We decorated our apartment well. I decorated while Marcus supervised and handed me ornaments, claiming he was terrible at aesthetic decisions. "You literally design user interfaces for a living," I pointed out. "That's different, that's functional design. This is artistic design, it requires your kind of brain." I'd kissed him and continued stringing lights. On Christmas Eve, we exchanged gifts. I'd gotten him a first edition of his favorite fantasy novel, something I'd been hunting for months. He'd gotten me a custom-designed graphics tablet, top of the line, something I'd mentioned wanting but could never justify the expense. "Marcus, this is too much." "No, it's not," he said firmly. "You deserve to have good tools for your work, plus I've seen your sketches, you're incredibly talented. And I want you to be able to pursue that." I'd had to blink back tears. "Thank you. Thank you for being exactly who you are," he said and kissed me. We spent Christmas Day in our pajamas, cooking an overly ambitious dinner that turned out surprisingly well, watching cheesy holiday movies, and generally being disgustingly domestic. "Is this what our lives are going to be like?" Marcus asked as we lay on the couch together, full of food and content. "What do you mean?" "Just this comfortable, happy together. Would that be so bad?" "It would be perfect," he said. As the new year approached, we started talking more seriously about the future, about moving into a one-bedroom together, about what we wanted long-term. "I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life," Marcus said one night. "Is that crazy? We've only been together for 3 months." "It's not crazy," I said. "I want that too." "Yes. Yeah." We started apartment hunting in January, looking for a place that would be ours together rather than mine with him as a roommate or his with me as a guest. Something that represented both of us, our shared life. It took 6 weeks, but we finally found it, a one-bedroom in the Alberta Arts District with huge windows and exposed brick and enough space for both of our work setups. It was more expensive than our current place, but we could manage it together. "This is it," Marcus said when we walked in for the first time. "This is our place." I could see it too, our furniture arranged in the space, our lives blending together completely rather than existing in parallel. We signed the lease that day. Moving day came in March, almost a year after Marcus had first moved into the apartment where this all began. Our friends helped us pack and transport everything to the new place. Liam made endless jokes about us playing house. Jessica kept saying how cute we were until Marcus threatened to revoke her best friend privileges. That night, after everyone had left and we were surrounded by boxes in our new apartment, we ordered pizza and sat on the floor of our empty living room. "Margarita for you, vegetables for me," Marcus said, opening the boxes. "You remembered." Of course I remembered. It's what we had on that first night. That first night, the night Marcus had fallen asleep on the couch, the night I'd realized I loved him, the night everything changed. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" I asked. "If you hadn't fallen asleep that night, if one of us hadn't been brave enough to say something?" "All the time," Marcus admitted. "I think about the alternate universe where I woke up and went to my room, where we stayed just roommates, where we both convinced ourselves that what we were feeling wasn't real or wasn't worth the risk. I'm glad we're not in that universe." "Me too." He set down his pizza and moved closer, taking my hand. "Adrian, I need to tell you something." My heart skipped. "Okay." He took a breath and I realized his hand was shaking slightly. "I had this whole plan. I was going to wait until we'd been in the new place for a month, until everything was unpacked and perfect. I was going to take you to that restaurant you love, the one with the view of the river, and do this properly." "Do what properly?" Instead of answering, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Time seemed to stop. "But then I realized," he continued, his voice thick with emotion, "that this is more us. Sitting on the floor of our empty apartment, eating pizza surrounded by moving boxes. This is real life. This is our life, and I don't want to wait for some perfect moment when this moment right here is already perfect." He opened the box, revealing a simple silver band. "Adrian, I know we've only been together for 6 months. I know people will say it's too fast, that we should wait, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life than I am about you, about us." His eyes were bright with tears. "Will you marry me?" I couldn't speak, could barely breathe, could only stare at him, at this incredible man who had somehow become my entire world. "You don't have to answer right now," he said quickly, misreading my silence. "I know it's fast, and if you need time to think about it." "Yes," I managed. "Yes, of course, yes." His face transformed, joy and relief and love all at once. "Yeah. Yeah," I said, laughing through my tears. How could I ever say anything else? He slipped the ring on my finger, a perfect fit, because of course he'd somehow figured out my size, and then we were kissing, crying, laughing, holding each other like we'd never let go. "I love you," he said against my lips. "I love you so much." "I love you too," I said. "Forever, remember." "Forever," he agreed. Epilogue 2 years later. The coffee shop where we're meeting our wedding planner is the same one where Marcus and I first met when he was applying to be my roommate. It feels appropriate, coming full circle like this. "I still can't believe you proposed after 6 months, Liam says, stealing a bite of my croissant. He's my best man, which gives him certain privileges, apparently including theft of my breakfast. "When you know," I say, which has become my standard response to this comment. Marcus arrives then, slightly out of breath from running from his car. He's been at the office since 6, but he'd promised to make this appointment. His startup is doing incredibly well. They've just secured Series B funding, but he's gotten better at work-life balance, mostly. "Sorry I'm late," he says, kissing my cheek and then stealing the other half of my croissant. "Traffic was a nightmare." "Hey, why does everyone think they can just take my food?" "Because you always order too much and then offer it to us anyway," Marcus says reasonably. He's not wrong. Our wedding planner arrives and we spend the next hour going over details for the ceremony in June. We're keeping it small, just close friends and family at a botanical garden outside the city. "Have you written your vows yet?" she asks. Marcus and I exchange a look. "We're working on them," I say, which is a generous interpretation of we've both been too nervous to actually start. After the meeting, Liam heads to work and Marcus and I walk through the city hand in hand. It's a beautiful spring day, the kind that makes you grateful to be alive. "I've been thinking about my vows," Marcus says as we walk, "about what I want to say to you in front of everyone we love." "Yes. Yeah, and I keep coming back to that night, the night I fell asleep on the couch." I smile. That night changed everything. It did, but you know what? I think we were always heading here, maybe not that specific night, maybe not that specific moment, but we were inevitable. Inevitable. From the moment I walked into that coffee shop and saw you sitting there, reading a design magazine and drinking what I would later learn was a disgustingly sweet vanilla latte. Hey, don't judge my coffee choices. I felt this pull toward you, like I'd been looking for something without knowing what it was, and then there you were. He stops walking, turns to face me fully. "So yes, inevitable, we were always going to find our way to each other. That night was just when we stopped fighting it." I pull him close, right there on the sidewalk, and kiss him. A car honks. Portland drivers have no patience for public displays of affection, but I don't care. "I think that should be your vow," I say when we break apart. "What you just said, that's perfect." "What about yours?" I think about it, about everything we've been through, everything we've built together, about how my life divided into before and after that Tuesday night in September. "I think I'll talk about how you made me believe in love again," I say. "How you made me believe that I deserved to be loved. How you took all my carefully constructed walls and didn't tear them down but just walked through them, like they were never really there at all." His eyes are shining. "Adrian. And I'll talk about how grateful I am that you fell asleep on our couch. Because that's when I realized I'd been lying to myself about being content alone. That's when I realized that I wanted this, wanted you more than I wanted the safety of my uncomplicated routine." "We're going to make everyone cry at this wedding," Marcus says. "Good, they should cry. It's going to be beautiful." We continue walking, planning our future, telling each other the stories of our past, living fully in our present. Because this is what love is, I've learned. It's not just the grand gestures or the perfect moments. It's the everyday choosing of each other. It's falling asleep on couches and waking up changed. It's being brave enough to tell the truth even when it terrifies you. It's building a life together, one small decision at a time. It's my roommate falling asleep, and that night changing our lives forever. The end.